Hello, this is 7th standard again, and this is the second unit, New Kingdoms and Kings and Kingdoms. Many new dynasties emerged after the 7th century. Map 1 shows the major ruling dynasty in different parts of the subcontinent between the 7th and 12th. So between 7th and 12th century, so we find Pandyas, Cheras, Cholas, Rashtrakutas, Gujararas, Pratiharas, Palas. Okay, all these people we find during the 7th and 12th century. The emergence of new dynasty. By the 7th century, there were big landlords or warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent. Existing kings often acknowledged them as their subordinates or samantas. They were expected to bring gifts for their kings or overlords, be present at their court, and provide them with military support. As Samantas gained power and wealth, they declared themselves to be Maha Samantas, Maha Mandaleshwar, and so on. So it is at 7th century, big landlords or warrior chiefs, they were subordinates of Samantas. So they got the power and declared themselves as the Maha Samantas. So okay, next, sometimes they asserted their independence from their overlord. Okay, so they became all independent from their overlord. One such instance was that of the Rashtrakuta in the Deccan. So as we saw here, the Rashtrakutas were in Deccan. Initially, they were the subordinates of the Chalukya of Karnataka. Okay, in the middle 8th century, Dandi Durga, a Rashtrakuta chief, overthrew his Chalukya overlord and performed a ritual called Hiranya Garbha. It literally the golden womb. When these rituals was performed with the help of Brahmanas, it was thought to lead to the rebirth of the sacrifice as a Kshatriya if he was not one by birth. Okay, that is called as Hiranya Garbha. In other cases, men from enterprising family used their military skills to carve out kingdoms. For instance, the Kadamba, Mayura Sharma and the Gujarara, Pratihara, Hari Chandra were Brahmanas who gave up their traditional professions and took to arms, successfully establishing kingdoms in Karnataka and Rajasthan respectively. Administration in the kingdom. Many of these new kings adopted high surrounding titles such as Maharaja, Adiraja, Great King, Overlord of King. Okay, so okay. Then Tribuna Chakravartini, Lord of the Three Worlds, and so on. However, in spite of such claims, they often shared power with the Samantas as well as with association of peasants, traders and Brahmanas. In each of these states, resources were obtained from the producers, that is peasants, cattle keepers, artisans, who were often persuaded or compelled to surrender part of what they produce. Sometimes they were claimed as rent due to lord who asserted that he owned the land. Revenue was also collected from the traders. For 100 taxes, the inscription of the Chola who ruled in Tamil Nadu referred to more than 400 terms for different kinds of taxes. The most frequently mentioned tax is vetti, taken not in the cash but in the form of forced labor, and kadami or land revenue. There were also taxes on tranching the house, the use of a ladder to climb palm trees, a cess on succession to family property, etc. The resources were used to finance the king's establishment as well as for the construction of temples and forts. They were also used to fight wars, which were in turn expected to lead to the acquisition of wealth in the form of plunder and access to land as well as the trade routes. The functionaries for collecting revenues were generally recruited from influential families and positions were often hereditary. This was true about the army as well. In many cases, close relatives of the king held these positions. Prashasti and land grants. Prashasti contained detail that may not be literally true, but they tell us how rulers wanted to depict themselves as valiant, victorious warriors. For example, these were composed by learnt Brahmins who occasionally helped in administration. So Prashasti is nothing but praising, right, about the success of the warriors. The achievements of Nagabhatta. Many rulers describe these achievements in Prashasti. You read about the Prashasti of the Gupta ruler Samudragupta last year. One Prashasti written in Sanskrit and found in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh, describes the exploits of Nagabhatta, a Pratihara king, as follows. Okay, this is a praising which, okay, let us keep it aside. Kings often rewarded Brahmins, but kings often rewarded Brahmins by grants of land. They were recorded on copper plates, which were given to those who received the land. Okay, what was given with the land? This was a part of Tamil section of a land grant given by the Cholas. We have demarcated the boundaries of the land by making earthen embankments as well as by planting thorny bushes. This is what the land contains: fruit, berries, trees, water, land, garden and orchards, trees, wells, open space, pasture, land, village, ant hills, plant farms, canals, ditches, river, slit, laden land, tanks, granaries, fish ponds, beehives and deep lakes. He who received the land who collected tax from it, he can collect the tax imposed by judicial officer as fines the tax on betel leaf, that on a woven cloth as well as on vehicles. He can build large rooms with upper stories made of baked bricks. He can get large and small wells dug. He can plant tree and thorny bushes. If necessary, he can get canals constructed for irrigation. He should ensure that water is not wasted and that embankments are built. Usually for the 12th century was a long Sanskrit poem containing the history of kings who ruled over the Kashmir. It was composed by an author named Kalhana. He used a variety of sources including inscription documents, eyewitness accounts and early histories to write his account. Unlike the writers of Prashastis, he was often critical about rulers and their policies. Warfare for wealth. You may have noticed that each of these rulers' dynasty have based in a specific region. At the same time, they tried to control other areas. One particular prized area was the city of Kanuj in Ganga Valley. For centuries, years belonging to the Gujrara, Pratihara, Rashtrakuta and Pala fought the control over the Kanuj. So we saw the Kanuj here. So let us read it. So this is Kanuj. So we saw that Gujrara, Pratihara and Rashtrakutas and Palas, all these were fighting here. Okay, for the place of Kanuj. Why? Let us see. Because these three parties in their long drawn conflict history often describe it as tri-party struggle. As we will see, rulers also tried to demonstrate their powers and resources by building large temples. So when they attacked one another's kingdom, they often chose to target temples which were sometimes extremely rich. Okay, I will read that in the chapter 5 they say. One of the best known of such ruler is Sultan Muhammad of Ghazni, Afghanistan. He ruled from 1997 to 1030 and exerted control over parts of Central Asia, Iran, and the northwest part of the subcontinent. Okay, okay. Then he raided the subcontinent almost every year. His target were wealthy temples, including that of Somanatha Temple, Gujarat. Which of the wealth Muhammad carried away was used to create a splendid city of Ghazni. Okay, so Sultan Muhammad was also interested in finding out more about the people who he conquered and entrusted a scholar named Al-Biruni to write an account of the subcontinent. The Arabic work known as Kitab al-Hind remained an important source for historians. He consulted Sanskrit scholars to prepare this account. Other kings who engaged in warfare included the Chamanas, later known as Chauhans, who were over the region around Delhi and Ajmer. So we'll just see where is Chamanas. Chamanas are here. So around Delhi and Ajmer. Okay, they attempted to expand their control to the west and the east, where they were opposed by the Chalukyas and of Gujarat and the Gahadawalas of western Uttar Pradesh. The best known Chamanas ruler was Prithviraj III, who defeated an Afghan ruler named Sultan Muhammad Ghori in 1191, but lost to him very next year in the 1192. Okay, now next let's look at the Cholas. Okay, this is from Urayur to Tanjavur. How did the Cholas rise to the power? So all this time what we looked was just small recap. Administrations in the kingdom, so how they adopted, and prashastis and land grants. So for brahmanas, how did they give the land grants and how did they mention, and so this is a thing which how they mentioned, and warfare for wealth. So how the three-party struggle which took place for years uh, for the place of Kannauj. Okay, so now let us look into the Cholas. From Urayur to Tanjavur, how did Cholas rise to the power? A minor chieftain family known as Muttarayar held power in Kaveri Delta. They were subordinates to the Pallava king of Kanjipuram. Okay, so even they were subordinates to the Pallava kings of Kanjipuram. Vijayalaya, who belonged to the ancient chieftain family of the Cholas from Urayur, captured the delta from the Muttarayar in the middle of the 9th century. He built the town of Tanjavur and a temple for goddesses Nishubashuddhi. Let us read again this. Nishubashuddhi. There. Okay. The successor of Vijayalaya conquered neighboring regions and the kingdom grew in size and the power. The Pandya and the Pallava territory to the south and north were made part of this kingdom. Pandya kingdom of, okay, so I'll just show you the map again. So Pandya kingdom of south and Pallava kingdom, they say. Pallava is not seen here. Territory of Pandya and Pallava south and north. Okay, it was somewhere here and here. So they were made the part of the Cholas. Okay, so the kingdom. Rajaraja I, considered the most powerful Chola ruler, became king in 985 and expanded control over most of these areas. He also recognized the administration of the empire. Rajaraja's son Rajendra I continued his policies and even raided the Ganga Valley, Sri Lanka and countries of Southeast Asia uh, developing a navy for this expedition. Okay, so what we have to remember very mainly is in Cholas there is Raja one, okay, and Rajendra one, okay. So Raja's son Rajendra one. So he continued. So we have to remember all this Rajendra one all come under the Chola, who basically fought the north and south. Who that Pandyas and the Pallavas they fought and they expanded their kingdom. Splendid temples and bronze sculpture. The big temples of Tanjore and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, built by Rajaraja and Rajendra, are architecturally and sculpturally marvelous. Okay, two temples which we have built by Cholas, Tanjore and Gangaikonda Cholapuram. Chola temple often become the nuclei of settlements which grew around them. This were center of craft production. Temples were also endowed land by rulers as well as by owners. This produce of this land went into maintaining all the specialists who worked at the temple and were often lived near it. Priests, garland makers, cook, sweepers, musicians, dancers, etc. In the other words, temples were not only the place of worship, they were the hub of economic, social, and cultural life as well. So, excuse me. Amongst the craft associated with temple, the making of bronze image was the most distinctive. Chola's bronze image are considered amongst the finest in the world, while most image were of deities, some image were made of devotees as well. Agriculture and irrigation. Many of the achievements of Cholas were made possible through many new developments in agriculture. Look at the map 2. So, map 2. Note that the river Kaveri branches out in several small channels before emptying into the Bay of Bengal. So, okay, map 2 is in the previous chapter. So, we'll just turn and see. So, this Kaveri usually it will flow here. So, we can see that small branching which is happening here. So, he talks about that, and finally it drains into the Bay of Bengal. These channels overflow frequently, depositing fertile soil on their banks. Water from the channels also provides the necessary moisture. Water from the channels also provides the necessary moisture for agriculture, particularly the cultivation of rice. Although agriculture had developed earlier in the parts of Tamil Nadu, it was only from the 5th and 6th century that this area was opened up for large scale cultivation. Forest had to be cleared in some region, land had to be leveled in other region. In the delta region, embankment had to be built to prevent flooding, and canals had to be constructed to carry water to the field in many areas. Two crops were grown in a year. In many cases, it was necessary to water crops artificially. A variety of methods were used for irrigation. In some areas, wells were dug. In other places, huge tanks were constructed to collect rainwater. Remember that irrigation works require planning, organization, organizing labor and resource, maintaining these work, and deciding on how water is to be shared. Most of the new rulers, as well as people living in villages, took an active interest in these activities. Okay, so now let us look into the administration of the empire. How was administration organized? Settlements of peasants, known as became prosperous with the spread of irrigation agriculture. Groups of such village formed large units called Nadu. The village council and the Nadu performed several administrative functions including dispensing justice and collecting tax. Rich peasants of the Velayat caste exercised considerably control over the affairs of Nadu under the supervision of the central Chola government. The Chola king gave some rich landlords title like Muvenda Vellar, okay, etc. A Vellar or peasant serving three kings, Ariyar chief, etc., or as marks of respect and entrusted them with important offices of the state of at the center. So peasants is group of such village called Nadu. So village council Nadu perform administrative functions. So types of land. Chola inscriptions mention several categories of land. Velanna Vagi, land of non-Brahmin peasants, proprietors. Brahmana Dhehi, land gifted to Brahmins. Shala Bhogha, land for the maintenance of the school. Devadhana, Devadhana Tiruna Mattukani, land gifted to temples. Palicha Chanadham, land donated to Jain institution. We have seen that Brahmins often receive land from land grants or Brahmadeya. As a result, a large number of Brahmin settlements emerged in the Kaveri Delta as in the parts of South India. Each Brahmadeya was looked after by an assembly or sabha of prominent Brahmana holders. These assemblies worked very efficiently. These decisions were recorded in detail in inscription, often on the stone walls of temples. Association of traders known as Nagarmas also associate performed administrative functions in the town. Inscriptions from Uttara Meriu in Chengulipattu district, Tamil Nadu provided details of the way in which the Sabha was organized. The Sabha had separate committees to look after irrigation work, gardens, temples, etc. Names of those eligible to the members of this community were written on small tickets of palm leaves. These tickets were put into a earthenware ball from which a young boy was asked to take out the tickets one by one for each committee. So this is about the inscription in text that okay. So here we saw the inscriptions from the Uttara Meru in Chenguli Pattu district. So this is about the inscription. So no need, it's not very important for the exam. So however this names, but the inscription tells us about the kings and powerful men. Here is an excerpt from the Periyu Puranam, a 12th century Tamil work which informs us about the lives of ordinary men and women. Okay, so as we all know that these questions will be discussed separately. Okay, next we'll have to look into the third chapter. We'll do it. Thank you.